These were the men of the Star Chamber who made the decision to have John Kennedy removed as President of the United States. John McCloy, Allen Dulles, Averell Harriman, Henry Cabot Lodge, Dwight Eisenhower. Their decision was all done under the guise of plausible deniability. All they said was that urgent regime change was necessary. They never ordered him to be killed, but that was implicit. All of these men were men of respect beyond reproach. They would never be challenged or thought of as possessing ill will. Some may argue that these men were of such impeccable character that they would not do such a thing. I argue that their so-called impeccable credentials and their knowledge of themselves as being untouchable led them to do such a thing. Dwight Eisenhower was universally adored. Parades were held in his honor. He was elected twice as President of the United States. Who could possibly think ill of Dwight Eisenhower? Certainly not the greatest generation. Averell Harriman was the son of E.H. Harriman, the largest railroad magnate in the nation when he was alive. Averell Harriman and his brother Roland went on to form Harriman Brothers, which eventually became Brown Brothers Harriman. Prescott Bush worked at the firm, and George Herbert Walker Bush was the son of Prescott Bush. Harriman went on to become the governor of New York, as well as a roving international fix-it man for several presidential administrations. Henry Cabot Lodge, a Harvard graduate, was a former senator from Massachusetts, an ambassador to the United Nations, and an ambassador to South Vietnam. He was Richard Nixon's running mate in 1960. John McCloy was a graduate from Amherst and Harvard Law. He was an active figure in both corporate and government spheres. He was also, like Harriman, a roving international fix-it man for sensitive issues. When an important commission needed to be formed, McCloy's name would always be tossed about. No average person at the time would conceivably look at these men and say, oh, they are so evil. For the most part, they operated in the background in the murky world of international intrigue, negotiation, and trade deals. Each one, though, had his own particular axe to grind with John Kennedy. Henry Cabot Lodge was part of the Lodge family, which had a long-running battle with the Kennedy family over control of power in the state of Massachusetts. Lodge had worked hard to help elect Ike as President of the United States in 1952. Lodge was Nixon's running mate in 1960, and Eisenhower preferred that he return to the United States and run against Goldwater in 1964. Clearly, Lodge was a trusted man and an elite man, and he was a Boston Brahmin to boot. And the Boston Brahmins are an elite connected group of families in the New England area. Allen Dulles, the former director of the CIA, was sacked by John Kennedy for his performance during the Bay of Pigs operation. Dulles was a graduate of Princeton and a former member of the OSS. His brother John Foster Dulles was Ike's Secretary of State. Dulles was integral in the establishment of the Gehlen Group, which was comprised of former Nazi spies. Allen Dulles knew many secrets. Averell Harriman, who thought of himself as the most knowledgeable person on world affairs, was largely relegated to a second-tier status within the Kennedy administration. This had to hurt his pride. As the scion of the Harriman family, which controlled Brown Brothers Harriman, this skull and bones member was heavily connected into the power structure of the ruling class in America. Dwight Eisenhower thought Kennedy was inexperienced. He thought he represented a cult of personality. He also didn't like his policies, which he felt represented exorbitant spending. It's also important to note that JFK had a beef and a personal disdain for the CIA, which Ike clearly felt attached to. Ike had used the CIA extensively while in power to interfere and overthrow governments in Iran and Guatemala. John McCloy, the ultimate corporate insider and the representative of the Rockefeller family, merely felt that Kennedy's policies were unworkable. McCloy was the former chairman of Chase Manhattan Bank. As a young man fresh out of Harvard Law, he had personally tutored the young Rockefeller lads, Nelson and David. All these men had dedicated their lives to enforce a Pax Americana upon the globe. Their goal unequivocally was for America to replace the British Empire. Along came an upstart named John Kennedy with a different vision. He articulated this vision most effectively in his speech at American University in June 1963, when he stated that we, America, did not desire to enforce a Pax Americana upon the world. In so doing, he was repudiating the life's work of these 5 men. They must have been chilled to the bone when they heard Kennedy give this speech. But it wasn't just words at American University that doomed John Kennedy. He backed it up with actions by implementing his Alliance for Progress in Latin America, independence for Indonesia, non-intervention in Vietnam, revoking the oil depletion allowance, a no-invasion policy for Cuba, taking on U.S. Steel, and many other actions, among them an investment in technology in developing nations to lift them out of poverty. In this manner, their out-of-control populations could be curbed. This was quite a different approach than your typical sterilization program that many elites in the United States and Europe subscribe to. That approach was to keep developing nations poor, dumb, and exploitable. And if their populations grew out of control, well, famine and the laws of Robert Malthus would take care of that. What JFK believed was that America should be a partner with the other nations of the world to make them better. He did not believe that America should be a force of exploitation to benefit corporate America. And thus, these 5 men, in consultation with others, made the executive decision to have John Kennedy removed from power. There are no records, there are no transcripts, there are no photographs of their meeting, although a good bet is that they met at Arden, the family home of the wealthy Harriman family in upstate New York. Their life's work stands as testament to their deed. All 5 men were heavily invested in corporate America. All 5 men were heavily invested in America's foreign intervention and other governments via the CIA. All 5 men were highly supportive of the United States overthrowing governments and engaging in assassinations. 3 of the men, McCloy, Dulles, and Eisenhower, were responsible for the creation and establishment of the CIA. McCloy and Harriman were heavily invested into the banking establishment of the United States. Eisenhower, Harriman, and Lodge were political operatives who went far in helping establish our foreign policy before and after World War II. Harriman and Lodge were responsible for sending the vital communication which encouraged the generals in Vietnam to assassinate President Diem, thus altering the course of the Vietnam War. This is now viewed by modern historians as a huge mistake because the assassination of Diem further destabilized Vietnam. McCloy and Dulles worked at 2 of the most powerful law firms in the nation. McCloy had worked at Cravath, Swaine, and Moore. Dulles had worked at Sullivan and Cromwell, which figured prominently in the shenanigans of the United Fruit Company in Guatemala. Dulles and McCloy sat on the Warren Commission investigating John Kennedy's death. Although Dwight Eisenhower did not sit on the Warren Commission, many of his bedfellows, including Earl Warren and John Sherman Cooper, did. All these 5 principal men had known each other since World War II. They knew each other socially, they knew each other professionally. They were the 1890ers. All men were born in and about the years 1890 to 1895. As such, they were a generation ahead of John Kennedy, who was born in 1917. They saw themselves as wiser, more experienced men. They were the creators of the New World Order, and they were the apotheosis of fascism. Someone had to make the executive decision to proceed with the removal of JFK. It's not possible that a minor figure undertook this decision on his or her own. These were the men who decided. These were the men of the Star Chamber. Out.